December 1914. In the frozen Caucasus Mountains, an entire Ottoman army was about to vanish. Not in battle, but in ice and snow. Within weeks, 78,000 soldiers would be dead. Most wouldn't die fighting the enemy. They would freeze to death, abandoned in the mountains by their own commander's catastrophic miscalculation. This is the story of how the Ottoman Empire entered the Great War, and how desperation, ambition, and hubris led to the empire's greatest military disaster. By 1914, the Ottoman Empire was dying. For decades, European diplomats had called it the sick man of Europe, a once mighty realm now gasping for survival. The symptoms were everywhere. Economically, the empire was bankrupt, its treasury drained by decades of war and corruption. Militarily, it was a relic. While European armies deployed machine guns and modern artillery, Ottoman soldiers marched with outdated rifles and equipment. Diplomatically, the Ottomans were isolated, their territorial losses mounting with each conflict. The Balkan Wars of 1912–13 had been humiliating. In just months, the empire lost nearly all its European territories. The Russo-Turkish Wars had stripped away the Caucasus. Each defeat brought foreign creditors and foreign control over Ottoman finances and infrastructure. The Young Turks, military officers who seized power in 1908, promised modernization and strength. But by 1914, they faced an existential question. How do you save an empire that the world has already written off? The answer, they believed, lay in finding the right ally. But who would ally with the dying? The Ottoman leadership knew war was coming to Europe. They turned first to Britain and France, their traditional rivals. The response was silence. Neither power wanted an alliance with an empire they considered too weak, too unstable, too risky. Then came betrayal that sealed the Ottoman fate. The Ottoman government had commissioned 2 modern dreadnought battleships from British shipyards, symbols of Ottoman resurgence, funded by public donations from across the empire. Children had given pocket money. Families had sold jewelry. The entire nation had invested in these ships. On the eve of World War I, as tensions mounted, Britain simply seized them, without compensation, without apology. The ships the Ottoman people had paid for became HMS Agincourt and HMS Erin, serving the Royal Navy. The outrage in Istanbul was volcanic. If any illusions about Western friendship remained, Britain had just shattered them. Only one power was left: Germany. Germany didn't see a dying empire. It saw strategic opportunity. The Ottomans controlled the Turkish Straits, the only naval route between the Mediterranean and Black Sea. They bordered the Suez Canal and Persia's oil fields. The Ottoman Sultan held the title of Caliph, spiritual leader of millions of Muslims living under British and French colonial rule. For Germany's war planners, an Ottoman alliance could cut off Russia from its allies, threaten British imperial lifelines, and potentially ignite Muslim uprisings across the colonial world. On August 2, 1914, Germany and the Ottoman Empire signed a secret alliance. The Ottomans would close the straits to Allied shipping. Germany would provide financial aid and military equipment. But publicly, the empire remained neutral. That fiction wouldn't last. 2 German warships, the battle cruiser SMS Goeben and light cruiser SMS Breslau, raced across the Mediterranean to Istanbul and were immediately sold to the Ottoman Navy. The transfer was pure fiction. German crews remained aboard. German Admiral Wilhelm Souchon took command of the Ottoman fleet. On October 29, 1914, the world learned where the Ottoman Empire truly stood. Without warning, without declaration, the Ottoman fleet sailed into the Black Sea and opened fire on Russian ports. Sevastopol, Odessa, Novorossiysk all came under bombardment. Russian ships were sunk, oil facilities burned. Civilians died. The Ottoman government claimed the attack was unauthorized, that Souchon had acted independently. Russia didn't believe them, neither did anyone else. Russia declared war on November 2nd. Britain and France followed within days. On November 14th, Sultan Mehmed Fez, in his capacity as caliph, issued a declaration of jihad, calling on Muslims worldwide to rise against the Allied powers. The call largely failed. Most Muslim soldiers in Allied armies remained loyal. But the declaration made clear this was now total war, and the Ottoman Empire was about to learn just how unprepared it was to fight one. The Ottoman Empire now faced enemies on all sides. In the Caucasus Mountains to the east, Russia. In Mesopotamia to the south, Britain and its Indian colonial forces. In the Red Sea and Arabia, more British troops moving to secure vital imperial routes. In the Caucasus, Russia launched the Bergman Offensive in early November. The fighting was brutal and inconclusive. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, not just from combat, but from the mountains themselves. Winter was setting in, and neither army was truly prepared for what that meant. In Mesopotamia, Britain moved decisively. On November 22nd, British Indian forces landed near Basra and quickly seized the city, securing oil interests and expelling Ottoman defenders from the Persian Gulf. Further south, British forces captured the fortress of Sheikh Said, protecting the sea route to Suez. These were strategic losses, but they were sideshows compared to what was being planned in Istanbul. One man believed he could win the war in a single decisive stroke. His name was Enver Pasha, and his ambition would kill tens of thousands. Enver Pasha was only 33 years old, but he was already Ottoman Minister of War and one of the empire's most powerful men. A hero of the young Turk Revolution, he was bold, charismatic, and dangerously overconfident. He studied Germany's recent victories and became convinced he could replicate them. He admired Hannibal's encirclement at Cannae. He envisioned himself as the general who would crush Russia and reclaim lost Ottoman territories in the Caucasus. His plan was audacious. Personally laid 90,000 men of the Ottoman Third Army in a winter offensive to encircle Russian forces at the town of Sarikamish. While one force attacked the Russians frontally, two flanking columns would sweep through mountain passes in a massive encirclement, cutting off retreat and destroying the entire Russian army. On paper, it was brilliant. In reality, it was madness. The routes Enver planned were barely passable in summer. In December, they would be frozen death traps. His soldiers lacked winter clothing and proper equipment. Supply lines would stretch across mountain passes that would soon be buried in snow. The logistics were impossible. German advisors warned him. His own commanders expressed serious concern. Enver dismissed them all. He had made up his mind. On December 22, 1914, the Ottoman Third Army began its march into the mountains. They were marching toward annihilation. Almost immediately, everything went catastrophically wrong. The temperature plummeted to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Blizzards reduced visibility to nothing. Soldiers in thin uniforms trudged through waist-deep snow, their fingers blackening from frostbite, their feet freezing in inadequate boots. The flanking columns, the key to Enver's entire strategy, made agonizingly slow progress. What should have taken days took weeks. Men collapsed from exhaustion and exposure. Entire units simply vanished into the white emptiness, lost in the storm and cold. Supply wagons couldn't navigate the mountain passes. Food ran out, ammunition ran out, medical supplies never arrived. Soldiers ate their pack animals, then ate snow, then ate nothing at all. When Ottoman forces finally reached Sarikamish on December 29th, they were already broken. The main attack, meant to be merely a diversion, became the only attack because the flanking forces had been destroyed by the mountains themselves. Those who did reach Russian lines were exhausted, starving, and freezing. The Russians, by contrast, were well supplied, well positioned, and reinforced. They held their ground and counterattacked. Ottoman assaults were cut down in the snow. Russian artillery shattered what remained of Ottoman cohesion. By January 3, 1915, The offensive had completely collapsed. Enver ordered a general retreat, but for many it was already too late. Thousands more Ottoman soldiers died in the withdrawal, staggering back through the mountains, pursued by Russian forces and hunted relentlessly by winter itself. When the survivors finally limped back to Ottoman lines, the full scale of the catastrophe became undeniable. Of the 90,000 men who had marched into the Caucasus, only 12,000 remained fit for duty. Some 78,000 were dead, wounded, captured, or missing. The majority had died not fighting the Russian army, but fighting the winter, a war they never had any chance of winning. It was one of the single worst military disasters in Ottoman history, and it had been entirely preventably avoidable. Enver Pasha returned to Istanbul, but he did not return in disgrace. Instead, he did what failed leaders throughout history have done when their failures are too great to admit. He found someone else to blame. He claimed that Armenian soldiers in his army had deserted or even defected to the Russians. There was no evidence for this accusation. Armenian units had fought and died in those frozen mountains alongside everyone else. But in the paranoid, wartime atmosphere of Istanbul, the lie took root. Within months, the Ottoman government would use the supposed disloyalty of Armenians as justification for what came next. Mass deportations and massacres that historians now recognize as the Armenian genocide. The disaster at Sarikamish didn't cause the genocide, but Enver's lies about it provided a convenient scapegoat for catastrophic military failure. For the Ottoman Empire, the catastrophe at Sarikamish was just the beginning of 4 more years of brutal warfare. The empire would fight at Gallipoli, Mesopotamia, Palestine, and Arabia. It would win some battles, most notably at Gallipoli, and lose many more. By 1918, it would be defeated, occupied, and ultimately dismembered. But in many ways, the empire's ultimate fate was sealed in those frozen mountains at the end of 1914. Sarikamish revealed the truth that Ottoman leaders had desperately tried to deny. Their empire was too weak, too poor, and too poorly led to survive a modern industrialized war. They had gambled everything on German alliance and bold offensives. They lost, and the price would be paid not just by soldiers freezing in the Caucasus, but by millions of civilians across the empire in the terrible years to come. Today, the Battle of Sarikamish is remembered in Turkey as a national tragedy, a monument to the catastrophic costs of miscalculation and the suffering of ordinary soldiers sent to fight impossible battles by leaders who refused to face reality. The Ottoman Empire would survive another 4 years of war, but it would never recover from what happened in those mountains. The empire that entered World War I, hoping to reclaim its lost glory, instead accelerated its own inevitable demise. In the end, the sick man of Europe didn't die heroically in battle. He froze to death, slowly and painfully, in the snow. If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more forgotten chapters of history. Let me know in the comments what other World War I moments we should explore. Thanks for watching.